Old Westbury is an affluent village in Nassau County on Long Island in the state of New York. It's known for its historic homes and gardens, while its beaches, shopping, and restaurants provide a range of attractions. Only 18 miles from New York City, Old Westbury blends the best of both worlds, a serene and idyllic community with easy access to the lively city life. It also has the lowest crime rate of any county in the whole of the United States. May 29, 1982 was Memorial Day weekend, and the air was filled with anticipation and excitement. This holiday marks the unofficial start of summer. It means different things to different people, but for most, it's a chance to relax, have fun, and enjoy the warm weather. For Thomas, it meant throwing a party for his old friends from high school. He had just finished his semester at college and was back home for the summer. He wanted to catch up with his friends, share stories, and maybe meet some new girls. For 16-year-old Rory, it meant getting some food. He just finished work and was starving. He decided to stop by the diner for a quick bite before heading home. For Lauren, it meant starting a new job. She was 17 years old, and this was her very first job. She was nervous but excited to start earning a little pocket money of her own. She put on her uniform, grabbed her purse, and headed out the door. For old friends Rita and Karen, it meant having a girls' night out. They decided to meet at their usual place to grab a late-night meal. For Ishak, it meant another night of driving around town in his cab. He immigrated from Pakistan with his father and brothers, and he went into the taxi industry with them. He had just dropped off a fare nearby and decided to stop by the diner for a cup of coffee. When he parked his cab outside, he saw that it was crowded, but he was tired and really needed a boost, so he entered the diner to find a seat. But the story really begins 5 days earlier, on May 25th, when Annelle Kennedy, 18, drove to pick up her boyfriend Michael Williams and his 4 friends. They were James Martin, Robert Samuels, Bruce Garrison, and Aubrey Rawlings, all aged between 19 and 22. They came from a poor and crime-ridden neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. In the 80s, Brooklyn had more than 25% of its residents living in poverty and faced high rates of violence. Most of the friends had dropped out of high school, grew up with single parents, and some even had children of their own. Robert, only 19, already had a criminal record for burglary and larceny. The group had a daring plan: to rob a diner in Jericho, another wealthy town in Nassau County. They drove there from Brooklyn, crossing the border between 2 very different worlds. While Brooklyn had many people struggling with poverty and crime, Jericho had less than 5% of its population living below the poverty line and a much lower crime rate. The robbers hoped to find rich and easy targets carrying cash and jewelry. The group arrived at the Jericho Townhouse, a popular diner serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They quickly overpowered the employees and patrons and forced them to lie on the floor. They went from table to table, grabbing wallets, purses, watches, rings, and necklaces. Some of the customers tried to resist or plead with them, but they were met with punches and threats. The robbers collected over $37,000 in cash and jewelry. They then confronted the owner, and one of the men shot at him. The gun misfired twice, making loud clicking noises. The owner looked at them with disbelief and fear. The robber got angry and hit him on the head with the gun. After a 45-minute ordeal, the group ran out of the diner, leaving behind a scene of chaos and terror. They got into their car and sped away, thinking they had pulled off a perfect heist. The group was exhilarated by the success of their first robbery. They couldn't believe how easy it was to get away with thousands of dollars in cash and valuables. They felt like they had found a gold mine in Nassau County, where the people were rich and unsuspecting. Michael decided to recruit his younger brother Robert, who was eager to join in on the action. Aubrey and Michael's girlfriend weren't with them on the night of May 29th, when the group decided to continue their crime spree. The group ended up in Plainview, a couple of towns east from the diner they robbed 5 days prior. They decided that the Plainview diner was too well lit and had too many windows facing the street, so they moved on. In the nearby residential areas, they spotted a large house with a lot of cars parked out front. They figured it was a party and there'd be lots of people inside. They casually approached the house and ran into a couple who were just leaving. Pointing a gun at them, they demanded details about what was going on inside and who was there. They forced the couple back inside and went downstairs to the den where Thomas and his college friends were gathered. They forced everyone to strip and lie naked on the floor, then woke up Thomas's parents. They interrogated the parents about where all the valuables and electronics were located. They collected everyone's cash and jewelry on top of that. They were ecstatic with their haul. They also decided to terrorize and humiliate their hostages, especially the women. They assaulted the women, taking some of them into another room to violate them. They laughed and mocked the victims, calling them names and beating them with the gun and a blackjack. A blackjack is like a club or paddle, with one end weighted, usually with lead or other heavy objects like coins. In a final act of cruel indignity, they urinated on the victims before finally leaving the home. But they weren't even done yet, not by a long shot. Heading back west, towards Brooklyn, they spotted a pair of restaurants in Old Westbury, the Red Coach Grill and the Seacrest Diner. They chose the diner, which was less crowded and had what they called church windows, stained glass that was almost impossible to see through from outside. It was shortly after 1 a.m. when the group of men entered the diner, beginning the final act of one of the most horrible and traumatic crimes that county has ever experienced. Once inside, they ordered everyone down on the floor, telling them not to look at their faces or they would kill them, and telling everyone to remove their jewelry and their clothing. Rita and Karen clung to each other, one of the men kicking Karen when she failed to remove her earrings. The men demanded that anyone who had a gun hand it over. Tony, the night manager, and a retired police officer were among those who had their firearms taken. They randomly pistol whipped and beat the patrons with the blackjack, including Ishak the cab driver, who was knocked unconscious. They fired a shotgun into the pile of people, and the pellets hit 16-year-old Rory and one other person in the buttocks. As they did just a couple of hours earlier, the men assaulted some of the women and took others to the far end of the dining area to violate them. And if that wasn't horrible and degrading enough, they told the rest of the patrons to commit sex acts on one another while they watched. When it was all over, the diner gang left behind over 100 people traumatized by one of the most disturbing crimes that area had ever witnessed. 3 of the men were arrested the following day when the police spotted the stolen car. They discovered evidence in the vehicle that linked the men back to the robbery on the 25th. All of the participants were eventually caught and arrested. Ishak played a big role in apprehending the men. He was able to pick them out of a lineup so quickly it surprised the police. He credits being a cabbie for his talent for remembering faces. Annelle Kennedy and Aubrey Rawlings faced charges related to the Jericho Diner incident on the 25th. Michael's brother Robert Williams faced charges for his role in the car theft, Plainview House, and Seacrest diner crimes. And Michael Williams, James Martin, Robert Samuels, and Bruce Garrison all faced charges related to all of the incidents, dubbed the Diner Spree. The charges included sodomy, assault, sexual assault, burglary, robbery, and attempted murder. Annell Kennedy was found guilty of 7 counts of robbery and 1 count of assault, and sentenced to 7 to 21 years in prison. She was paroled after serving 5 years. Aubrey Rawlings was found guilty of 3 counts of robbery and 1 firearms charge, and was sentenced to 15 to 30 years in prison. He was paroled after serving 21 years. Michael and Robert Williams, James Martin, Robert Samuels, and Bruce Garrison were all found guilty of a total of 817 felonies. If served consecutively, they would have to serve 3,797 to 4,054 years in prison. At that time, the law did not allow them to serve their sentences consecutively, so each man received the maximum sentence of 15 to 30 years. A proposed amendment that would have enabled consecutive sentences for certain felonies and given judges more discretion in sentencing based on the number and severity of the crimes failed to pass the state legislature. Even if it had passed, it would not have applied retroactively to their trials. A similar amendment has since been enacted in recent years. The amendment aims to deter and punish the most serious and violent offenders in the state. Robert Samuels and James Martin received life sentences for another murder that the police uncovered during the probe. Bruce Garrison and Michael Williams spent the full 30 years behind bars. Robert Williams got out after serving 20 years because he took part in all the rehabilitation programs. All of the convicts are in their 60s now. Rory suffered a serious injury that required a colostomy, a surgery that creates an opening in the abdomen for waste to pass into a bag. This was done to let his wounded bowels heal. One waitress never returned to work or collected her last paycheck. Ishak struggled with migraines and insomnia. All of the victims were deeply scarred by the ordeal. Since all the men pleaded guilty, everyone was relieved that they didn't have to testify and relive their nightmares, but they also felt outraged by the sentence. They thought it was too lenient for such a heinous crime. The law changed in 1993 to increase the maximum consecutive sentence from 15 to 30 years to 25 to 50 years. What is your opinion on the sentence? Do you think the offenders deserved a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this case and found it interesting. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel for more true crime stories. As always, feel free to share your thoughts and feedback in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again, and be sure to join us next time as we explore the stories hidden within the wrinkles in crime.